Hello, folks. I'm Dan Lyman, citizen analyst, coming to you from a covert location in my sanctuary country of Iceland. I'm sitting down today with the infamous and beloved ex-Twitter hero, Ricky Vaughn, who was recently banned from the platform after amassing 62,000 followers with no reason given. After this heinous act of censorship, the Free Ricky hashtag was trending #1 on Twitter. We're here to help Ricky get his story out and learn more about the man behind the Charlie Sheen in a MAGA hat avatar. How you doing today, Ricky?
Good, Dan. Thanks a lot for having me.
Absolutely, for sure. So tell us about the situation. I know you've done a lot of interviews in the last few days. It's definitely a big story. So fill us in. What's going on? What happened? And where's it going?
Yeah, so basically, sometime last week, my Twitter account was banned, uh, and I recently got an email. I appealed the ban, and I recently got an email from Twitter saying that it was banned for participating in targeted abuse. So, but the problem is the definition of targeted abuse is so broad that really anything can be considered targeted abuse. Like if I retweet someone and then some of my followers say mean things to them, that could be considered targeted abuse. So it's kind of a silly thing. But so that's what happened last week.
That's kind of the way that they took Milo down. Basically, they said that he had basically put out the hit on Leslie Jones and kind of the dog whistle. They accused him of that, and then then all of his followers went after his review of the movie and all that. So, like you said, it's very loose as to the reasons as to why they can take you down and why they can censor you. If you had to take a guess, what do you think is the main reason that they would have gone after you, since there hasn't been a reason given?
Well, the main reason they're going after me is everybody, basically all the journalists and stuff, they all hated my account because, I would criticize them. I would call them out. So I know that the SPLC, or maybe it's the ADL, I can't remember, recently sent their lawyers to Silicon Valley, and they're pressuring these companies. They're lobbying for Twitter to remove these users. They call it hate speech. They call anything that they disagree with hate speech. So they've been lobbying Twitter to remove these people, and they basically have a list of people that they want banned if they can find a pretext. So I was at the top of the list. Obviously, Milo was #1 on the list. I was somewhere up there on the top of the list, so they came after my account and banned it. So that's what happened.
Right. I remember hearing something to the effect of you were like one of the 110 most influential personalities in this election, if I'm not mistaken. I think I heard that in your interview with Paul Kersey. I was unaware of that, but that's an awesome mantle to carry. So that's fantastic. How long did it take you to amass a lot of followers and 62,000, if I'm not mistaken, before you were kiboshed? And what was the tipping point like when you went from slow growth to exponential growth? Because I know that kind of like with social media, especially Twitter, the first few thousand, let's say, are quite difficult to come by, and then if you're successful, you hit a point where it's just a downhill slide, and you pick up steam from there. So how long did it take you, and what was the tipping point?
Yeah, totally. So, yeah, so I had an account for a year and a half. I didn't write much on it. In October 2014, I started tweeting more. By June, I had probably like 1,000 or so followers. So that was like 7 months. And then Trump started running, slowly building followers a little bit at a time. And then the big tipping point for me was New Year's Eve of 2016 this year. So when they had the rapes in Cologne, and they were censoring the people who were giving their first-hand account on Facebook, the German women who were being groped, or some of them were even raped, and they were censoring their accounts. So there were little stories in let's say the German press, and so I took those stories and translated them and posted them on Twitter, and that's when I started getting picked up by a lot of people. It was bringing this news to the U.S., and it was censored for 2 or 3 days. And so I gained a lot of credibility, and then that's when my account went from like 3,000 to 10,000 in the span of a week or so. And since then, it just grew exponentially over time, where I was just getting about, 200 followers a day, and then 250 new followers a day. And then by the time it got banned, I had been getting 300 a day for the last 90 days. So that's basically, yeah, you know, it was growing extremely fast. I was getting 10,000 followers and 10,000 new followers in a span of, 2 weeks.
That's impressive. Personally, I haven't hit that tipping point on Twitter. I guess I should spend more time on it. But what I've always wondered, as someone who has such an active account like you or Mike Cernovich or Donald Trump, where he's got millions of people, is your phone constantly going off, or do you like turn off all the notifications? And how do you sort through the massive influx of notifications? Let's say.
Well, I just can't look at them. It's impossible. So obviously, I turn off obviously I would turn off the alarm. What do you call it? The alerts on your phone, and then I was getting 120,000 mentions a month. So it's impossible to read all this. So I basically would not even touch my notifications because it was too much. Sometimes I would go in there and just see what's going on and respond to a few people for fun. But basically, there's nothing much I could do about that. DMs were crazy too. A lot of DMs. I even had to ignore people's DMs. Otherwise, I would be responding to DMs all day. And then I would sometimes go back through my old tweets and see if anyone had an interesting response, and I would respond to them. So that's how I did it.
I've always wondered a little behind the scenes on someone with a exponentially busy social media account. So you mentioned that back in June of 2015, I guess it would have been, is when you really kind of started picking up, and obviously that coincided with Trump's announcement that he was going to run. Did you know right off the bat, or maybe even ahead of time, that when there was whispers that Trump was going to run, that he'd be the kind of person that you wanted to support? Did you have another candidate that you were supporting at the time, or were you kind of like a lot of us, where we're really apathetic as to the crowd and kind of maybe a Rand Paul possibly, but it was all very uninspiring until Trump announced? And personally, that I knew right when they started talking about it, I said this is going to be amazing. But what was it like for you, and what was your timeline?
Oh yeah, I was totally apathetic. I mean, I probably wasn't going to be. I probably wasn't even going to pay attention to the presidential race. If I wasn't that impressed with the Tea Party people, uh, like Scott Walker or Rand Paul, because I thought that they had sold out to the special interests, uh, or in Rand Paul's case, the Israel lobby. Um, and Ted Cruz never was into him. Same thing. I saw him as a neocon. So I was totally apathetic. I would have sat out. The whole thing seemed like it was going to be rather depressing, with Jeb Bush, with a small lead in the polls, and then Hillary Clinton obviously winning the Democratic side. So once there were some people saying how they like Trump, Trump is a great Twitter troll or whatever, and I didn't really pay much attention to them because I never really paid much attention to Donald Trump. But there was a thread in my posting career.com called My Populism Career, I think. It's just a play on words. It was about how a candidate could run a populist campaign in the 2016 election. It was really interesting stuff. But I thought it was all purely theoretical. But then once the media started reporting on Trump's announcement speech, and everyone, there's this, when I read the speech, I was like, okay, he's running on the populist platform that was outlined, in April of 2016 or something in this thread. And it was like, this is amazing. And not only that, he's fighting, and he's politically incorrect. He's fighting back against the media, who we're so used to just shutting people down and, going after them and trying to shut them up, make them grovel, make them apologize. So I was hooked from day one on that. Once I saw that he was going to be running on a really populist platform, anti-illegal immigration, sort of America first foreign policy, I was totally on board ever since I saw the media report on his speech.
You raised an interesting point there about the investigating the possibility and the reality that someone could run on a populist platform, which is something that hasn't really been done, definitely not successfully. Perot had a little bit of success, but in general, it doesn't work in the two-party system because the GOP never allows it, and anyone who would want to doesn't have the firepower or the financial ability to do it. Trump is the first to be able to do it. And that raised an interesting point. You just brought back a memory for me. When Jeb was talking about running, it was long before anyone had announced. He basically said, I'm going to run without even paying any mind to the Tea Party faction, to the populist type, nationalists and all that. And he said, I'm just not even going to pay any attention to them or devote any time to them. And I would say that if I had to guess, Trump's campaign is almost an inversion of that approach, and we see how that worked out. $150 million spent on Jeb's campaign, and he was out by the third primary. And I
Oh
don't
yeah,
even know if Trump has spent that much yet. Probably in that ballpark, much later in the game, running the completely opposite
right.
campaign. So yeah, amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. Absolutely. These people all, it's amazing how stupid some of these people were. They all bought into this lanes theory of politics where apparently everyone fits into a certain bucket. And so, there's an establishment bucket. So you got to run your establishment campaign and you're going to appeal to whatever 30% of the party. And then, people thought that you could run in a Tea Party lane. And then there was the evangelical lane. Ted Cruz was trying to run on the evangelical and Tea Party and even try and pull in libertarians. But it was all very stupid. And I read some good analysis of the race by, a conservative or a Republican sort of consultant. And he was saying, well, Trump, all he did was he just had the best macro messaging and basically took the best stances on the biggest issues and had the best slogans for those stances and just running on macro messaging rather than trying to micro target all these little groups, these little baskets, these little buckets of voters. He just said, I'm going to appeal to everyone. And that's what he did. He was getting a slice of everyone, whether it's 40% of women or 40% of evangelicals, 40% of non-evangelicals, 40% of Tea Party, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and it's funny how, we all know that the Democrats, the socialists, they're basically like the special interests party. They just, like, they target the minorities, the illegals, the Muslims, I mean, whatever. And people don't realize the GOP does that as well. Just like you're saying, they compartmentalize everyone, and then they run all these different candidates who can target each group. And like you said, Trump is the first candidate that has been able to pull chunks from each group, because what it really boils down to is Americanism, the America First message, and it resonates with so many people. And I was just reading Ann Coulter's new book, in Trump. I think it's in Trump We Trust. And she was saying how Trump has so many great, like you said, the best stances on the biggest issues. She said, but everyone has latched onto the build the wall one, and that's the one that has
Oh yeah.
resonated with everybody. And she said people could chant anything they want at these rallies, but they all chant build the wall. That is what has really, struck a chord with everyone. A lot of people think that Trump's not going to build the wall, and or Mexico's not going to pay for it, and or it's not effective. What are your thoughts on the wall?
Well, I mean, people are wrong because, first of all, it's not so difficult as it sounds building a wall. The experts say you only need 1,000 miles of wall. The border is 2,000 miles long, but you only need a wall on 1,000 miles of it. And, they just had a Mexican foreign minister say, Trump could very easily make us pay for this wall. It's not hard to do when you're giving these people 50 billion a year in foreign aid, or, we're giving them so much aid. Not to mention, we allow our companies to go build factories there. So it's really not going to be difficult to do. The biggest problem with it is going to be dealing with the Congress. Um, Trump could get it done without using the Congress by by declaring it a component of national security, I think. But you'd rather go through the Congress, right? So that'd probably be the most difficult thing. can he whip these Republicans uh, into voting for his wall? And I think the blue dog Democrats will go along with the wall too. I mean, so if he gets in there, I don't think it's going to be that difficult to do. But probably the hardest thing to do will be dealing with the Congress.
Yeah, I think another one of the most important elements of this election, underneath the presidential election, is the amount of people that are going to be coming to the polls that either A, wouldn't normally vote, B, wouldn't have been as informed going into the polls as to what the real issues are. We're going to have a lot of immigration patriots at the polls. We're going to have, like you said, a lot of blue dog Democrats who've been awakened to what the serious issues and that what their party is pushing, and even what the GOP cucks are pushing as well. So I think that this could have a massive, the Trump effect could be massive across everything from the presidential election through congressional, senatorial, all the way down to local officials. You're going to have a whole new wave of people voting, and for a different reason. So my hope is that this is like not just a landslide presidentially, but across the political spectrum. I hope that that's what the effect is. So onto a lighter topic. Are you a Trump supporter in real life? Are you someone who can do that without jeopardizing your job or, let's say, your friendships or whatever? Do you own the MAGA hat that you have in the avatar? Do you own any Trump gear? What are the public reactions to your Trump support in real life, if you're allowed to?
Oh yeah, totally. I own Trump gear. People know I'm a Trump supporter. Uh, it can affect other people, but it doesn't really bother me. Uh, they if someone there are people who are definitely bothered by it, I think, in terms of friends or even family, but I don't think it matters because, you know, I don't get bothered by them supporting Bernie or Hillary or Kasich or whatever. So, it doesn't bother me. If anything, if they don't want to be friends anymore, really could care less. But most people are pretty much it's interesting. The people who are sort of supportive or understand are usually more like regular, ordinary people. The people who are bothered by it are definitely the most. I went to a good school, so I went to a school where it's full of these people who really buy into this cosmopolitan, global citizen mindset. So these people, they're probably the least tolerant, the least supportive. But that's fine. That's just the way it is. But it kind of is pathetic that these people they really don't know how to deal with different ideas or even debating different ideas. They're very much sort of indoctrinated. So, these people might be the most clever people in terms of passing a standardized test, but it's kind of sad that they're not learning that much at school. They're not really learning how to think. They're not really learning how to, take a stand on anything.
Yeah, it's definitely true. The butt hurt is a one-way street. Personally, I come from, I was in Hollywood music scene for 10 years, and then I was living in LA area at the time. Before that, New York. The majority of my friends are from either of those areas. Those are two like the bluest, liberalist, areas in the country. And then specifically Hollywood, LA is just total cesspool of socialist, indoctrinated, globalist types. And I've definitely learned how many of them do not appreciate where I stand on things, especially in the last year and a half. And like you said, it doesn't matter to me either. It's water under the bridge. It's totally fine. Let's move on to the debate. I want to know your thoughts on the debate in general, Trump's performance. How would you rate it, and what were some of the highlights for you?
Well, Trump's performance was extremely memorable, and I thought he did very well. He did exactly what he needed to do, which is really rally his base of support. Um, so I thought he did well in terms of winning over undecideds. He might have been able to do that as well. Hard to say, but he was put in a tough spot with the Friday leak. I don't know who leaked it, but he was put in a tough spot, and he really came through and hit it out of the park. Now Hillary's no slouch. She did well at the debate, I thought, but I still think Trump outclassed her. And the the best moments were the most memorable lines. Some of them, when he told Hillary how She lost fair and square in 2008, and she won this time, but it wasn't so fair and square. That was really brutal, and everyone, everyone sort of, a lot of people said Trump's a buffoon, he doesn't study, he has a short attention span, but I was wondering how much of that is just an act. I wonder if he even threw the first debate because he knew the lines of attack on Hillary so well, and he was so prepared to bring the attacks to her that it sort of dispelled any notion that Trump doesn't know what he's doing. Uh, so his debate performance, I don't think is enough to win him the election, but that's okay because we got two more, three, almost a month, almost 4 weeks more of campaigning and one more debate. So I think he's really got to come out next debate and put her away and also somehow generate some positive news stories in the next 28 days.
Yeah, he's definitely got to make some power moves in these last 4 weeks. His last debate performance has to be even more powerful than this one, which will be hard to top. It was really a great performance. I personally, the first 10 minutes, I know we were all holding our breath. We're all starting to say, "Uh-oh, he's not going where we thought he was going to go today, or where we hoped." And then he right into that special prosecutor statement after like a really good 2 minute rip. I got the chills when he said the special prosecutor thing, and you could tell she was just devastated by that. So I was like, oh, this is going to be a bloodbath. So it ended up
Oh
being,
yeah,
it ended up being,
absolutely.
and the maneuver right before the debate where he brought, a lot of Bill's victims and the woman
Yeah,
that was victimized by Hillary when she was 12 years old.
right.
Amazing. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and people said, "Why did he do that? Why did he do that?" Well, he had to blunt her attack on him on the women issue, and that was a perfect way to blunt the attack. And yeah, you notice how he started off sort of slow, but really all he was doing is waiting for the Hillary attack because he didn't want to be seen as launching the first attack because people would have said, "Oh, he's belligerent, he's a bully." So he was just waiting and waiting for her to launch her attack on him, her personal attack on him, and then just going to devastate her in return. So it was strategically very smart.
and also he allowed the moderators who weren't so moderate. Martha Raddatz was the worst I've ever seen, but
Yeah.
he drew them out as well. He made it clear that it was the 3-on-1 before going into anything. So he really, like you said, he set the stage. He let them all start attacking him. He played it cool, and then he just unleashed the hellfires. It was awesome. It was great.
Oh yeah, he was just pacing the stage. I mean, he was in his element. You could tell that he loved it. I mean, he's not the kind of guy who wants to go up there and give us canned response about, a canned scripted line about, what he's going to do. He was just pacing around the stage in his element. It was really amazing to behold. And what it really did was it really galvanized the anti-Hillary people because, 60% or whatever of this country doesn't like Hillary. So I think it really galvanized those people. Like I was talking to some people who are undecided, but they hate Hillary, right?
Yeah.
So these are people that are not in the Trump camp yet, but they probably are going to vote for him on November 8th. So he really came out and did to her what a lot of people wanted to see happen. Even the neocons or the never Trump people were like, wow, he won the debate, he killed her, he blew her away. Even though they still hate Trump, they at least would admit it.
Yeah, I don't think any of the other candidates that were running prior, the conservatives, the neocons, the couple of who know what the whatever they were, none of them would have done anything remotely close to that. It would have been totally scripted. It would have been the standard fare. She would have come out on top. It would have been a joke. So along those lines, two quick questions: Who is the absolutely the most cancerous conservative out there?
Wow, that's such a good question. Um, I mean, I just want to say Bill Kristol because he's so dishonest, he's so disingenuous. That's the one that comes to mind at first, even though there are probably worse out there. But he is a high profile guy, and is just ridiculous. He's almost a laughable guy. That's the one that comes to mind. How is he the most influential? I'm not sure about that, but
I agree. He's terrible. I think Glenn Beck just moved up the ranks considerably in the last 24 hours, basically
Oh
saying that
yeah.
Hillary was the moral, ethical decision or something like that. I mean, it's just like the Trump effect has been so powerful in exposing the everyone, all the traitors, all the losers. So along those same lines, who is the worst cancer in liberal media?
Um, ooh, that's a good question. There's so many of them, and a lot of them were raised up through the Democratic Party and before they went into media. Uh, well, this is going to be a funny answer, but one of them is Joy Behar because she's on that show. I forget what it's even
The
called.
View.
The View. Yeah, The View. And they're just spoon feeding millions of American women this garbage. Um, and she's ridiculous. She's a total hatchet woman
She actually
for the liberal
called some of Bill
press.
Clinton's rape victims tramps yesterday.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and she'll get away with it too. No one's gonna call her out for it.
That whole show is
Um,
cancer.
yeah, that show is totally cancer. Now, as in terms of sort of more mainstream, uh, I always viewed Jake Tapper as kind of an interesting guy because actually a decent journalist. He's pretty effective. He's pretty fair 90% of the time, which just gives him credibility. But what he does with that is 10% of the time, when he comes out with an attack, it's just devastating, and he's really good at it. And it's kind of disgusting in my opinion. But because he's so effective 90% of the time, he can afford to get away with these like brutal hatchet jobs 10% of the time. But there are others. There's so many more to mention. John Harwood, who's basically an arm of the Clinton campaign in the WikiLeaks, reveals that too. He's sort of like sucking up to them the whole time. John Dickerson on CBS is a ridiculous guy, really an effete, waspy guy. Just sort of an example of the weakness that sort of has spread from the WASP elite. But there are so many to name. It's really amazing. It's unbelievable.
I think one of the ones personally that I think has done some of the most damage is Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert, two of them in
Oh yeah.
tandem, because they prey on young minds. And it's like people my age, I don't know how you are, how old you are, but let's say millennials up through Gen X, Gen Y, they pose as comedians, but then they're just the propaganda is just nonstop, incessant. I can tell immediately when someone is talking to me when they're like trying to debate or whatever. I know exactly who they are when they start sounding like they watch the Daily Show every night or watch Colbert. They just spout these talking points, and I'm just like, you've been poisoned by Jon Stewart, and immediately they get super offended and whatever. But it's
Yeah,
those
it's crazy. It's crazy. Thank God. Thank God. It's good that he's done doing his thing. His moment probably has passed because you can only regurgitate so much. You know, anti-Bush attacks 8 years after Bush is gone, and Colbert has terrible ratings on his new show. You never see him in the news. So, yeah, those two were devastating for quite some time, and thank God that their influence is waning. You still see John Oliver go around, right? People still send John Oliver links around. Um,
he's like the new Jon Stewart,
he's the new Jon Stewart. Yeah, I don't think he's as effective or believable, so
right?
that's a good thing.
I have to say, I'm very encouraged by the cultural backlash that's occurring, like on college campuses. I think Milo is one of the guys that really is like leading that charge, and we've needed that. And that's something that Andrew Breitbart was always very strong about, how important it was that conservatives had their own cultural, weapons. Like we have Ben Garrison now, we have Cernovich is a powerful cultural weapon. We have Milo, we have people like yourself who were like blending in some humor. We're having a good time with it. We are just completely destroying the left on all fronts. I think it's super important for us to keep building that momentum if we're going to have any effect on where the country heads from here. It's super important.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You need to have a sense of humor.
Yeah.
You need to have culture, sort of like you need to sort of get into the broader culture in terms of humor, comedy, art. So that's really critical. You just can't let the left own the entire culture uh, and not have a response to it. So yeah, and some of it involves you do have to compromise with a lot of the mainstream culture in order to do it, but a lot of it is culture jamming. It's called culture jamming, where you're really hacking the mainstream culture in order to get your messages across.
Like using their social media platforms very
Yeah,
effectively.
exactly. Using their memes, using their style of language, etc.
Definitely. So, final, major question here. What are your predictions for a Trump-led America, and what are your predictions for a non-Trump, Hillary Clinton-led America? What happens?
Well, I hope that if Hillary wins, that she's going to be ineffective and sort of marginalized because she's so hated. But actually, I can imagine the cucks teaming up with the Democrats to push her agenda through. So, not too sanguine about it, not too sanguine about what she would mean for free speech, what she would mean for trying to shut down dissidents. Uh, I think that you could see a lot of movement on the internet trying to end in anonymity, uh, a lot of movement on trying to pass hate speech laws could happen, a lot of movement on trying to, they're sending the internet over to the UN. So that starts to get into the whole question of, are they actually going to go after domain names if they think you're spreading whatever Islamophobia or some nonsense like that? So it's not too good. Not to mention, uh, Neil Ferguson said this on one of the morning shows. He read her agenda, and all it is more taxation, more regulation, and basically just more of the same. So that would not be a good thing. I just think the economy would continue to collapse. I don't think Hillary has any ideas to actually grow the economy. Her tax raises, her tax hikes would devastate basically everyone. Uh, so not too optimistic about Hillary Clinton. The only thing I could say is you would hope that the Democrats would get wiped out in the 2018 midterms uh, by sort of American nationalist candidates running in the Trump mold if Trump loses the election. Now, if Trump wins the election, I think that he could face a very hostile Congress. There's been talk of impeaching him, but I think that he would be able to marshal enough support and use the bully pulpit to bring all these people into line to enact his agenda, which I think his agenda is incredibly positive. Uh, I would like to see him I would like to see him have a smarter foreign policy, cheaper foreign policy where we're not wasting all this money on, F-35 jets that don't even work properly. So I'm optimistic on Trump's agenda. I think he's going to be able to get illegal immigration under control, deport the criminals at first as a start. Um, and I think he's going to be really successful with his agenda. The only thing that would concern me about Trump is, can he sort of draw down the debt if he's going to be running and pushing a massive infrastructure spending plan and tax cuts? Then you'd hope that he would be able to take the fat out of the budget. There's so much fat in the budget. You'd hope that a guy like Trump would be able to get in there and cut it out. Uh, and he's also mentioned eliminating the 80% of regulations that are unnecessary and burdensome. So I really think that not only would our country turn around and you would start having people be optimistic again, people could feel proud to be an American. People could stop feeling guilty about, being white and winning everything in the past 500 years. Uh, so I'm really optimistic about that. And I would even hope that he would be able to address things like declining American birth rate uh, for especially white people. We're having this huge problem with birth rates. And I think that if he could somehow make it cheaper, more affordable to start a family and sort of encourage people to reinvest in what's really important, friends, family, community. So I'm pretty optimistic about Trump if he can pull off this election.
Great. I share your optimism. So you've started a Facebook page. I see you have over 2,300 likes very quickly. That's great. So tell us the Facebook page and then also anything you have upcoming plans to kind of rise from the ashes, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have the Facebook page, posting a little bit of content on there, facebook.com/deplorablevaughn. You can also catch me on Gab, the new social media platform, gab.ai/Ricky_Vaughn99. And hopefully gonna have some more projects in the works. Want to come out with a website that can sort of be a hub of news commentary, maybe get into podcast and other things like that. So look for the website. But in the meantime, you can get me on the other two platforms, and hopefully I'll be doing more radio interviews like this.
Great. Thank you so much, Ricky. And thanks for all the hard work that you put in through the selection. We're all chipping in to make this happen and carry Mr. Trump across the finish line. So we got about 28 days left. Let's do this, and I look forward to the rest of your content and your new endeavors.